this is an iHeart podcast.
This is a real good story about Drew, a real United Airlines customer.
After almost 4 years of treatments, I was finally cancer-free. My mom's like, where do you want to go to celebrate? I'm like, let's go somewhere tropical. And then pilot hopped on the intercom and started talking about me, and I was like, what is going on here?
My wife beat cancer too, and I wanted to celebrate his special moment.
That's Bill, a real United pilot.
We brought him drinks and donuts. We all signed a card.
I was smiling ear to ear. Best flight ever, for sure.
That's how good leads the way.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1058 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I've got nothing for you to kick off today's show. Just make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, and make sure you're not yelling at me when I inevitably get a ton of stuff wrong on today's show. Nothing but love for all of you. Let's get to these questions. The first question this week is from Twitter. It's from @TLWTravis. It says, how are you viewing Bashal Tutin, Kyle Monangai, Sean Tucker, and other similar running backs who appear to be earning more work approaching RB1B for their teams? Who do you like best rest of season to put on your bench? So it's kind of hard to know which other similar running backs you're talking about here, but I can at least talk through those three guys and give you an idea of where I stand. I say this to late round subscribers almost weekly when I do my rest of season rankings, but the hardest part about those rankings is balancing upside with immediate production. Like, Brian Robinson has a decent amount of upside, but his immediate production, it's not going to be there. Like, I'm ranking Alvin Kamara ahead of Blake Corum this week. I believe Kamara is going to score more points, but Blake Corum undoubtedly has more upside rest of season than Alvin Kamara does. If Kyren Williams were to get hurt, we're talking about a lead back in one of the best offensive environments in football. So how do you rank them? I mean, I could argue strongly that there are some teams out there that would actually be better with Blake Corum than Alvin Kamara, that's a better option for their bench. And I feel the exact same way when looking at questions like this. I at least go through a very similar exercise. Bashal Tutin and Kyle Monangai are actually in pretty similar situations at this point. And that's if we assume that Tutin's going to continue to see a lot of work in that backfield like he did in week 11 before he got hurt. But if he keeps seeing that kind of work, his backfield split might look like Chicago's. But either way, you're not like starting Kyle Monangai every single week as long as DeAndre Swift is back and healthy. Even if Monangai has like a 1 or 2 point edge in weekly projection versus Tutin, it still doesn't make him someone that you want to start each and every week. So from that perspective, you're probably just looking at the upside case. And the upside case is that Tutin is a better prospect, in my opinion, of course, who's in a pretty comparable situation overall. Maybe it's slightly worse because the Bears have averaged like 0.3 more PPR points per game as a backfield this year, but it's overall comparable enough. And I also think that Tutin has more big play and receiving ability. That's why I have Tutin ahead of Kyle Monangai rest of season. Now, I had Sean Tucker a decent bit below those two running backs in my rest of season rankings this week, because those rankings made the assumption that Bucky Irving would be back soon. But we've been saying that for like a month now, and it's not like things have gotten that much more optimistic this week. I think Tucker has worked himself into a bigger role. And as I'll talk about in a second, Tampa Bay is a pretty nice rest of season schedule. The weird thing with Tucker is that if everyone's healthy, I'd have him last on this list probably, because he does need multiple things to happen in order for him to be like that true RB1 in his backfield, that bell cow. For Tutin and Monangai, we only need one injury, and we saw that earlier this year with Kyle Monangai when DeAndre Swift was out. But I think there's a very real chance that we get more immediate production from Sean Tucker, given this Bucky Irving situation. So given everything that I just said, you can look at your team, evaluate your team, and see what you need, because that will dictate which one of these running backs you should be rostering. And speaking of Bucky Irving, Let's talk about this next question. This next question is from Twitter. It's from @LudyJabooty. It says, what kind of production do you expect from Bucky Irving if he reverts to a 55% or so snap share player? He was a league winner last year on a similar share, but I have a hard time convincing myself he can repeat, and re-injury risk seems high. Perhaps he's a sell on the positive news. Well, since this question was sent to me, there hasn't been that much positive news with Bucky Irving. That's not your fault. Things have just changed over the last 24, 48 hours. Not only is Irving's status still totally up in the air, but now we're getting reports about him being on more of a snap count when he does return, a ramp-up period. But I got about 1,000 Bucky Irving questions this week, so let's just talk about him. And let's first talk about his usage when he is healthy, when he's been healthy. Forget all the injury stuff for a second. Bucky Irving's usage before he went down this year, it was awesome. He saw no worse than a 13% target share in his 4 games, and he was averaging a 75% running back rush share per game rate. I mean, that's truly an elite combination. And that was not on a 55% snap share. He was closer to 70, 75%. The snap share stuff from last year, and the difference between that and what we saw at the beginning of this season, it was really the pass catching. Like, Bucky had a much more impactful receiving role to start this season, which is why he was in such a good spot. Just as an example, so you guys can wrap your head around this, Bucky hit a 50% route share just 3 times last year. He's done that 3 times this year, and it probably would have been all 4 of his games had he not gotten hurt. So his increased snap share isn't just him taking on more work on the ground. It's mostly that they were using him more as a receiver. We have to hope that that would continue, because that's going to be more sustainable and more valuable for Bucky Irving. Because yes, what he did down the stretch last year, not going to be super easy to repeat. When you're as efficient as he was last year, that's not easy to do year over year. But I don't see why Bucky Irving can't be a 60% running back rush share player with a 10% target share. Those are lower numbers than where he was at earlier this year, so we're banking on some of the injury stuff. We're embedding that in his projection. But that's still very strong within a good offense. Because his workload looks so good to start the year, that shows intent on the Buccaneers' end. Now, obviously, things have changed with this injury, but I don't think that means that Bucky Irving is like a total 50-50 player with Sean Tucker rest of season, as long as he's fully healthy. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room is that he's not healthy right now. If he was healthy, he would definitely be playing this week. At the time of this recording, I have no idea if that's the case. And honestly, it sounds more pessimistic than optimistic. And this is one of those cases where I know just as much as you guys do. I don't have any inside information on Bucky Irving's injury. And when he's back, like the report said on Thursday, and how we would just generally view this kind of situation, there's going to be a ramp-up period. And that's a good thing for someone like Sean Tucker, and why I talked about Tucker having better immediate production than Bashal Tutin and Kyle Monangai, at least Kyle Monangai. Here's the thing, though. If I'm sitting there and I'm a playoff team, I don't think I would be selling Bucky Irving. If I need a win right now, sure, I can totally understand that. And then on the buy end, I might buy Bucky Irving if I could send bench assets for him. So buying him isn't out of the question either. It's just one of those scenarios where you have to know what's happening with your individual team. We're late in the season now. This isn't just one of those situations where it's week 4 and we're taking a chance for rest of season value. We know right now where our teams stand. A lot of you have bye weeks already locked in. You know you're going to be a bye week team. And if that's the case, it's a little bit easier to have Bucky Irving on your bench. But if you're a 5-win team, then Bucky Irving is not helping you at all. But overall, I do think that there's still a decent chance that we get really good production from him in the fantasy playoffs. The Bucs get the Falcons, Panthers, and Dolphins in weeks 15, 16, and 17. Right before that, they get the Cardinals and the Saints. So after this week against the Rams, the 5 remaining games for Tampa Bay in this fantasy season, they're all pretty much average to above average matchups for running backs. So overall, I think the sentiment here is to hold tight with Bucky Irving. Scared money don't make money. But if you absolutely need to sell because you need a win immediately, I totally get that. But if you're set, I wouldn't be aggressively trying to sell low. And maybe that comes back to bite you. Maybe you could get value right now and he's just going to be out rest of season. We don't know that. We don't have that answer. But what we do know is how they were using Bucky Irving earlier this year, and what we do know is that Bucky Irving is a very good running back. The Bucs are a team that need to stay competitive, and Bucky Irving is their best running back. So even if he reverts back to some of his usage from last year, because of this schedule situation, as long as he is healthy, I still think he's going to be pretty useful. This next question is from @Lenson1TopF. It says, should you buy into Chase Brown for the playoffs / possible Joe Burrow return? Well, I'll say this about Chase Brown. His rest of season schedule, it's awesome. After they get past New England this week, they'll get Baltimore, the 8th best matchup by adjusted points allowed to running backs, Buffalo, who's the 3rd best, and this is being recorded before Thursday Night Football for the record. Then it's Baltimore again, Miami, who's the 12th best matchup, and then Arizona, who's 16th. Literally only plus matchups after this one against the Patriots this week. The only thing standing in Chase Brown's way is Samaje Perine's ankle. Perine's not going to go this week, but Brown's usage over the Bengals' last 2 games, which have come largely without Perine, his usage has been insane. He's had snap rates of 95% and 83%. His route shares have been 86% and 83%. That's amazing for a running back. He's seen target shares of 31% and 21%. His running back rush share is around 85%. I mean, he's seeing elite running back usage without Samaje Perine. If Perine's back, we'd likely lose a little bit of that. Now, there's a chance that Brown plays into more work because he's playing a lot better. I'm just saying that if you're going to buy into Chase Brown, which is fine to do, make sure you're aware that his current usage may not be his usage during the fantasy playoffs. There's a chance of that happening if Samaje Perine's back. Now, I don't have this strong urge to say to buy into Brown because I think fantasy managers generally know that he's getting more work, he's playing better, he's scoring more points, and Joe Burrow's coming back soon. Seemingly. But look, if you want to go for it, you want to trade for him, I think there's plenty of upside there. There's definitely reason to do it. And one of those main reasons is that schedule. The next question is from Blue Sky. It's from @WithParks. It says, can I get a confidence check on Bo Nix going into the final stretch here? He had some absolutely monster games, but the past 2 have been brutal duds, which doesn't inspire confidence come playoffs. Yeah, I think there's some reason to be nervous. Part of the problem is that Bo Nix is just not scrambling as much. I don't know if this is by choice or not, but from weeks 1 through 6, he didn't have a single game with a scramble rate below 3%. And most of those games were closer to 5%. One of them was at a 15% scramble rate. Since then, in his 5 games, he hasn't reached a 3% scramble rate once. That's literally what we need from Bo Nix to be fantasy relevant, because he's 28th in the NFL right now in completion percentage over expected. He's 20th in EPA per dropback. He has not been a great passer. So really what I'm nervous about is the lack of rushing. And not only that, Denver has a bottom 10 fantasy playoff schedule according to my numbers for quarterbacks. So yeah, I'm not super into Bo Nix. If the rushing was there, I'd be a lot more confident. The next question is from Twitter, is from @DavidTEvans37. It says, I have some depth that I can trade away. I need an elite wide receiver to get me into the playoffs. Who are your favorite wide receiver targets for the next 3 weeks? So I'll just tell you which wide receivers have the best schedules over the next 3 weeks according to my numbers. I talk buys and sells on the 15 transaction show each week, and I promise you guys, I'm not hiding anything from you. But maybe this will give you some inspiration, because there are some interesting teams with some pretty good wide receivers who have good schedules. Number 1 is Kansas City. Maybe you could buy a little bit low on Rashee Rice, and that would fit what you're talking about, trying to get an elite wide receiver. The Chiefs get the Colts, Cowboys, and then the Texans over their next 3. Now, obviously, Houston wouldn't be the easiest spot in the world for him, but Indianapolis and Dallas, not bad at all. Next is Cincinnati. You probably can't go with Jamar Chase because of that suspension, but T. Higgins maybe? They get the Patriots this week. That's a plus matchup. And then the Ravens, and then a not great matchup against the Bills. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are next, the Pennsylvania team. So DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Pittsburgh gets the Bears, Bills, and Ravens, which honestly, I don't love those matchups. And DK Metcalf, he's definitely not been an elite wide receiver by any means. It's just that in this case, Baltimore's numbers are being anchored a little bit by what happened earlier in the season. The Eagles, though, they get Dallas, Chicago, and then the Chargers. It's not a bad stretch of 3 games. And then Detroit is another one. All dome games like I've talked about on this show, and they get the Giants, Packers, and Cowboys over their next 3. Both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams are on the table with that one. No team has like 3 glorious matchups over their next 3 games. But those are some teams and players who could do pretty well during that stretch. The last question this week is an email. It says, "Hi JJ, love the pod. As we move past the bye weeks and head towards the playoffs, the question of carrying 2 team defenses is an annual tradition. Analysts often say it's a bad idea. That makes sense if the choice is between a defense and a player like Blake Corum, who's a clear backup on a strong team. But where is the real line? If the worst running back on your roster is Bam Knight and the waiver wire is empty, why would you not drop him and carry 2 defenses? In theory, if someone pops up on the wire, you still have a shot at that player. A bench stash depends on an injury and on the player being good enough to matter. A second defense can be a strategic move. Example, use Green Bay against Minnesota this week and stash San Francisco. Play them against Cleveland next week. If you already know you prefer San Francisco over Green Bay in week 13, you remove the first layer of uncertainty that applies to skill players. At that point, all that remains is analyzing whether the choice was right, and that same risk exists with bench stashes that fail all the time. Thanks, Dan." So look, I talked about stashing multiple defenses a couple of weeks ago on this show. And since then, I've gotten a few messages from people that are sort of along these exact same lines. So let's just talk about this. When I give advice on this show, I obviously can't capture every league iteration and every possibility that's out there. Yes, if the player you're stashing is someone like, I don't know, Phil Maffa, yes, I'd rather roster another defense and play things 1 week ahead. Not only does an injury have to occur and other things have to occur for Phil Maffa to even find the field, but even if he does, he's probably not a league-winning type player given his receiving profile. But 99% of people listening to this show, they're not out there choosing between a defense and Phil Maffa. Someone like Blake Corum is still rostered in just 15% of Yahoo leagues. And I know, not in your league. I get it. He's rostered in all of mine too. But even if a slightly more hardcore audience is listening to my show right now, that still means the majority of people have Blake Corum sitting on their waiver wire. Now, I don't know where that obvious line is, because it also depends on what the defensive situation looks like in your league. For instance, I'm in a league where people do hoard defenses. There are only like 6 available defenses right now. So I'm forced to roster multiple defenses. But if your league only has 12 defenses rostered, then there's less of a necessity to roster multiple defenses. I try to preach this all the time with roster management. When you're trying to judge what to stash on your bench, you should be looking at what's available on the waiver wire. This is most obvious at quarterback. If you have a fringe quarterback starter and you're wondering if you should roster a second one, see how many quarterbacks are available on your waiver wire. If you'd have 5 to 6 choices each week with reasonable projections, then you don't need to roster a second quarterback. If the best waiver wire quarterback right now is Mason Rudolph, then yeah, you probably want a backup. There's nuance to all of this. My main point in saying that non-defensive stashes are more important than defenses is that there's a ton of variance with defenses. And generally speaking, it's a less valuable position. You're going to gain a bigger edge in fantasy football if you have a backup running back who emerges from an injury than if you have a defense that has a good matchup. And yes, that injury still has to happen. And chances are it's not going to happen. And yes, you could argue that you could just get that guy off the waiver wire when that injury occurs. But you could also argue that you can find a reasonable streaming defense off the waiver wire without having to stash it. And you can do that right before your playoff matchup. Really, guys, when you hear me give advice, I just want you to do what's most comfortable. For you, for your league. I'm not here to be a dictator. I'm here to just give you some ideas to help you manage your fantasy teams a little bit better. There's always going to be a lot of nuance with the things that I say on this podcast. But hopefully, you're getting a good baseline for analysis. And hopefully, the things that I say, they're at least making you think a little bit deeper about this game. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. As usual, there's going to be a late round perspectives episode dropping later today. And then myself and David Kitchen will be live on YouTube, youtube.com/@lateroundff. We'll be live at 1 p.m. Eastern to do the late round fantasy football show. You can watch that immediately on YouTube when we're done, or you can wait for it to hit this podcast feed tomorrow morning. Regardless, try to consume it. It's a fun show that we do. Thanks for listening, everyone. Good luck in week 12. I'll talk to you next week.
Whether you're kicking off a campaign, gearing up for an event, or suiting up your team, 4imprint has the promo products to move your brand down the field. With thousands of customizable options like premium apparel, drinkware, tech totes, and giveaways, it's easy to score fan favorites that deliver impact. You'll get expert support, speedy delivery, and their 360-degree guarantee, so you can be 4imprint certain your order arrives exactly right on time. Explore more at 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
This is an iHeart podcast.